Councillor Muir.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This Reckon amendment is, albeit not surprising, still very disappointing, as it both ignores the personal stories so courageously told by Councillor Walker and others, plus the range of statistics which fully justify the original proposal, but it also runs contrary to the words of DUP leader Arlene Foster earlier this year. If these words are to have any meaning, this amendment cannot be supported by any DUP councillor present here tonight. If passed, the words of Mrs Foster, either in previous speeches or when addressing the Pink News event at Stormont at the end of June, are proven, sadly, to be rather hollow. If all the parties, including the DUP, were able to agree lighting up of Belfast City Hall in rainbow colours for Pride, then why not here in Ards and North Down? Is it because somehow LGBT people are a little less deserving of the recognition than in Belfast? Or is it that Arlene Foster's words carry more weight in Belfast? Being LGBT or T is not a lifestyle choice, as some would describe, or something to be disowned or ashamed of, but instead is what many of our ratepayers identify as. Perfectly normal and positive, but after decades of discrimination, intolerance and inequality, we have got a lot more to do to make life much better and to bring an end to the silence, plus the remaining areas of discrimination, and say, you are welcome, you are valued, we love you, without conditionality. As the Most Reverend Michael Curry stated at the marriage of His Royal Highness Prince Henry of Wales and Miss Meghan Markle on the day of their wedding, imagine our homes and families where love is the way. Imagine our neighbourhoods and communities where love is the way. Imagine our governments and nations where love is the way. To those who say, why bother? Or why bring a motion when we already meet our statutory obligations? Sure, the Council cannot change anything. I say to you, think of the lesbian, gay, bisexual or trans person at home or in work tonight, silent, their voice not heard in this debate, and contemplating their future like I did in the early 1990s, hoping for a better future where the Council explicitly says you are valued and you should be equal like everyone else, and we are prepared to make that commitment real by lighting Ards Town Hall one day a year in the colours universally recognised as a reflection of a truly vibrant, diverse society. I love Northern Ireland. It's my home. I think it's fantastic. I am astounded by the support I have got for this motion. I am truly emotional that my mother is here to support me tonight. But we can be much better than what we are here tonight. Let's strive for a better future. And in the words of the late Harvey Milk, the first openly gay person elected to public office in the USA and later assassinated, I know that you cannot live in hope alone, but without it, life is not worth living. And you've got to give them hope. To every councillor present here tonight, please, from the bottom of my heart, give them hope. Don't let this amendment pass. Think what if your son is, or could be, or daughter, or friend, or colleague, lesbian, gay, bisexual or trans, and let us bravely stand for something much, much better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Muir. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, it saddens me greatly, actually, that we have to have this debate this evening. We're being forced to have it. And it saddens me because after the committee was passed the proposal that we light up Ards Town Hall in rainbow colours on Pride Day each year, I've been contacted by so many individuals and families from across the borough who felt that finally we as a council had understood and accepted that the LGBT community needs our expression of support. And it saddens me because of the language that the movers of this amendment and others have chosen. They've called this simple act of support divisive, offensive, and they've accused Councillor Muir and me of undertaking a stunt. Mr Mayor, A stunt is a cheap play for attention. But as far as I'm aware, the only two councillors that have managed to get their pictures in the paper, the Belfast Telegraph, because of this issue, are Councillor Smith and Alderman Graham. So if this is a stunt, then we have failed miserably. Because, of course, this absolutely is not a stunt. And the very suggestion that Andrew and I would not have consulted widely with the LGBT community and their families before bringing this proposal to Council, that is truly offensive. Let me make it absolutely clear to members just how important this simple act of support will be to individuals and families across our borough. Within the LGBT community here in our own borough, 47% have considered committing suicide, and 25% have actually attempted to commit suicide. 35% have self-harmed, and perhaps most depressingly of all, 70% have suffered depression at one time or another. These figures are horrendous, and we should take note of every one of them. But what we really need to understand is that around each of these individuals confronting these feelings, there is a wide circle of family and friends who are supporting them, assuring them that they are loved, that their feelings that they are experiencing are not unusual, and most importantly, they are not wrong. But for many families, this is very challenging. As one parent wrote to me this week, "What do I do when I read where my 15-year-old son has written, 'For gay people like me, there is no future'?" Mr. Mayor, there are many members of the LGBT community this evening in our borough who feel isolated and scared. And as a council, there are a limited number of things we can do to help individuals and families. But the simple act of lighting up Ard's Town Hall in rainbow colours on LGBT Gay Pride Day as an expression of our support is one thing we can do. Because while we might only light up the building for a few hours on one day, we will shine a light of hope into the hearts and homes of so many of our residents throughout the year. Mr. Mayor, I know that the eyes of the borough are on us this evening, hoping that we will send them a positive message of support. A message that says to our LGBT community and their families and their friends that Ards and North Down Borough accepts and values you, and that we will do all we can to take practical steps to ensure this is a safe, welcome and secure place for you to be. So we each have an important choice to make this evening. And it's the choice we make will have an immediate effect on the many within our community. Importantly, we must understand one important thing, that by expressing our support for the LGBT community, it does not mean that we are diminishing our support and our respect for others throughout the borough. This is not a binary decision. There is support to go across everybody within our borough that requires it. In fact, I would suggest it makes our wider community even more coherent, as together we learn to celebrate and embrace the diversity that makes this place so special for us all. Mr. Mayor, I hope that members understand the impact that their
Councillor
vote will
Walker,
make
just a
this
reminder,
evening.
1 minute.
Thank you. They understand the impact their vote will make this evening, and they will feel able to reject this amendment. And I will also request a recorded vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. A recorded vote has been requested. And we move to Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I won't be supporting the amendment. I'd like to start by reading part of a message I received this week. It says, "Mr. Smith, I'm sitting here in floods of tears, joyous tears, after reading about your vote to light up the town hall next year. As a close relative of a gay man, and having watched his turmoil and mental health issues over the years, it means so much to our family." And I want to start off with that because we do need to remind ourselves that what we say and what we do as councillors can actually have a real impact on people's lives. Mr. Mayor, I'm not going to pretend to have a great understanding of the issues facing the LGBT community, but I hopefully have learned enough to know that out there are people in our own community, ordinary people who are our neighbours, our workmates and our friends. Some of them will be afraid to go to school tomorrow. Some of them will be actually afraid to go to work because they're going to face a day of bullying and harassment. There are some who are going to fear going home at night because it will be another evening for them where they are tormented in their own home. And there will be some who are actually torn apart every day because they are forced to live with the secret that, should it become known, we'd see them facing rejection, and possibly rejection by their own family. And all of this happens, Mr Mayor, not because these are terrible people, not because they've done anything wrong, but simply because they are gay, they are lesbian, they are bisexual, and they are transgender. For me, this is not a political issue. This is about doing what is right. It's about showing compassion and kindness to other people. It's about treating others the same way we all want to be treated, with respect, with dignity and with acceptance. Tonight we do have an opportunity to send a message to the LGBT community here in Ards North Down. They need to know that this council, their council, values them, and that together we want to create a society where everyone is accepted for who they are. Of course, if this proposal does pass, I do realise that the world isn't suddenly going to change for LGBT people. They're still going to face the same problems and the same issues tomorrow that they face today. But maybe, Mr Mayor, just maybe, that some of them will be able to face those problems with a little bit more hope tomorrow than they had today. Hope that we are a step closer to being a place where we can all be ourselves without fear of abuse, discrimination or violence. Because I do think it's worth remembering that a little over 30 years ago, it was basically illegal to be gay in this country. People were persecuted by the state simply because of who they were. People were forced to hide their true selves for fear of abuse and mistreatment. People couldn't love or be loved because of the prejudice of society. Of course, society has moved on, but for many LGBT people, intolerance and bigotry are still a day-to-day reality. This is something which we must all continue to confront and condemn. And in doing so, this council needs to say something very simple: that there is nothing wrong with being gay, nothing wrong with being a lesbian, nothing wrong with being bisexual or transgender, and no one should ever have to hide who they are out of fear. Mr Mayor, I'm sure all of us in this council want Ards North Down to be a place where everyone can feel part of. Tonight is part of that challenge. It's about shaping a society where everyone feels accepted. It's about building a borough where we can actually believe that we're valued. But more than that, it's actually about creating a community that everyone, including our LGBT friends, can call home. If we can meet that challenge, Mr Mayor, if we can create such a place, then I think that's something that all of us could take pride in. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Chambers.
It's really quite disappointing that this issue has become somewhat of a media frenzy over the last week or two, and lots of people outside looking to turn it into something perhaps bigger than it ever really should have been. I can't understand why it's been blown out of proportion. It's not like we're here tonight to debate same-sex marriage or some other sensitive social issue. We're really here tonight to demonstrate that we're a welcoming borough to a minority section of our community. Full acceptance of others, regardless of their race, religion or sexuality, takes small steps, and that's all this is: a small step, a gesture. And if that makes members of the LGBT community feel more inclusive within our already diverse borough, then what's the problem? Council buildings around Northern Ireland, including Stormont, have been lit up in rainbow colours with little or no objection. So why is this council unique? It will be a sad reflection of this council if we can't support the motion. At the end of the day, I can't comprehend why any political party in this chamber would have any difficulty in supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. This is a subject that's very close to my heart, and I'd like to thank Councillor Muir and Walker for bringing the motion. When I was growing up, I saw some of my best friends face ignorance, intolerance and even hatred because of their sexuality. This was not acceptable then, and it's not acceptable now. I'd like to think of myself as a straight ally. I'm a heterosexual person who supports equal civil rights, gender equality, LGBT social movements, and I challenge homophobia, biphobia and transphobia. Recently I went to see Brian Kennedy and Andy Reader in Donegal. At the end of the concert I stood arm in arm with the person I love, and we danced to the music under the fireworks. We embraced, and we even had a bit of a kiss and a cuddle. It was a public display of affection, and it felt like a special moment for us both. My partner is a member of the opposite sex, and at no point did I feel that this intimacy would be seen as inappropriate. I would like to think that if the person I loved was of the same sex, then that wouldn't make a difference. Unfortunately, even in 2018, there is a serious risk that some small-minded people would take issue with same-sex affection, and this act could provoke unwanted attention. Many LGBT couples choose not to show affection in public because they don't feel it's safe to do so. When I heard about this motion, I spoke to some of my LGBT friends and asked them about their experiences. Some of the stories I heard were horrific. Even holding hands in public can have serious repercussions. This is the ugly head of homophobia, and it's one indicator that there's still a long way to go before LGBT people are treated equally. A question I've heard asked before is, why is there not a straight pride? Straight couples don't have to carry out a risk assessment before they hold hands. That is why there's no straight pride. Many factors fuel this intolerance, but I'd like to highlight 3 this evening. There have been extremely offensive remarks by high-profile politicians which have served to normalise homophobia. There has been a strong and persistent resistance against the fight for equality. And finally, there is the fallacy that homosexuality can somehow be cured and a destructive and dangerous practice is involved. As politicians, we are in a privileged position where we can make a difference. We have been elected to represent everyone in the Borough, and members of the LGBT community need our support. There are many people in our Borough who are suffering from the consequences of intolerance, and it is our duty to be proactive on this issue. This is why, as a council, we need to be sending out a clear message to our LGBT constituents. Not only is it okay to be LGBT, you should take pride in being LGBT, because that is who you are. And this council will stand with you against intolerance, discrimination and hate. Lighting up the town hall in pride colours is a very small but important gesture. Hopefully this will go some way towards normalising the normal.
I now call Councillor Douglas, and I also have indications from Councillor Cathcart, Robinson, Fletcher and Woods at this point.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will not be supporting this wrecking amendment this evening. The notice of motion brought by my esteemed colleagues speaks to acknowledging the positive contribution that diversity brings to our communities, and accordingly affirms that all lesbian, gay, bisexual and trans people living, working or visiting our borough should be accepted and valued as equal citizens as part of a safe, welcoming and inclusive society. And I have to say I'm shocked to my core that anyone could actually oppose this. On what possible grounds? The motion asks for a report to consider how Council might promote this pledge, including the lighting up of the Ards Town Hall to mark Pride Day. This act is one of symbolism. It sends out a clear, warm and welcoming message to our children, our partners, our parents, our friends, our colleagues who self-identify as LGBT, that we as citizens and as a borough value them and want them as individuals to feel safe and welcome, to work, live, visit and socialise here. It is an act of unconditional positive regard to a group of people who have faced intolerable discrimination and stigma. With some challenging their identity, many are left feeling unable or uneasy about living their true lives. The level of mental ill health experienced by people who self-identify as LGBT, thoughts of life not worth living and suicide are disproportionately higher in this group, where many feel judged, not accepted and not tolerated. Some members may have noted the BBC News coverage 3 days ago of the 14-year-old girl, Lizzie Lowe, who completed suicide because she didn't believe that she would be accepted at her church as a gay Christian. And since her death, her church has become an inclusive church, embracing everyone. And this is unfortunately one example of how some people are treated. So members, let us consider this harsh reality for one moment. One young life tragically ended, but one life too many. Let us be a warm, compassionate, respectful and tolerant council and borough, and let us send out tonight a positive message to all people who identify as LGBT that you matter. Thank you.
I now call Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it very brief. I'm a fairly simple person, as you probably all are aware by now. I have a very simple viewpoint on many things. Councillor Kennedy earlier remarked that we all belong to different groups or tribes. Well, in my fairly simple view, I consider we all belong to one tribe, and that is the human race. Quite simply, we're all a complex mix of many parts, but we are all human beings, and we have that commonality. This motion is, in my view, designed quite simply to indicate to our LGBT population that they are just as valued as every other member of our community. They no longer have to feel like lesser beings. They no longer have to hide who they really are, that they should be ashamed. Those days are over, and I'm very glad of that. I had an old uncle as a child. He was actually my mum's second cousin, but I called him Uncle George. I could never understand why Uncle George was always very sad, very alone, took to crying quite often. It's only now as an adult that I realise my Uncle George was gay. But in those days, you couldn't reveal that to anybody. He had to hide that away. He was a school teacher, and to come out as a school teacher as a gay man in a boys' school, that would have been horrendous. That would have been suicide for this man. So people like my Uncle George deserve us to stand up and say, no, there's enough of that. We've had all that over the years. My Uncle George is behind me tonight, and he's talking through me, hopefully to all of you. I have no other agenda other than to make things right for everybody in our community. And that's what this motion is trying to do. Many of our LGBT people will have felt equally ostracised as my Uncle George. Over the years, they will have felt great pain, having to hide, having to not tell the truth about their real identity. And that's not right. And if we as a council can change that, well, what a position of power we're in tonight. If we can change that and show everybody in our community, yes, you are all equal. We are all equal. We're as entitled as everybody else to stand up and say, we're equal to everybody. This lighting up of the Ards Town Hall, in my simple view, is a fairly small gesture, but one which will mean so very, very much to so many people in our borough. And I would encourage all members to please have the courage to stand up and say, yes, everybody is equal. We're not trying to raise the LGBT people above anybody else. We're saying they're equal. I can see some people who think this is funny, but for me, my Uncle George is speaking to me tonight, and he deserves me to stand up and speak. And that's what I'm doing. Thank you very much.
I now call on Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor. Just ask the Chief Executive, can I propose an amendment at this stage? No. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll just make my speech. I wish to support the motion that was brought to corporate by Councillor Muir and Councillor Walker, and absolutely disassociate myself with the one that has been proposed by Alderman Graham tonight. We not only have a duty of care over all our residents and visitors in the borough, but also specific good relations duty to have due regard to the desirability and promotion of good relations on race, political opinion and religion. Section 75 places a statutory duty on public bodies to proactively address good relations. This means that a public authority must consider how the policies it makes and implements affect relationships between people of different religions, political opinions and racial groups. It involves considering steps to promote good relations amongst, for example, its employees, service users and others affected by its policies. The purpose of the duty is to mainstream good relations by placing it at the heart of policy decision making. Importantly here, Section 75 formalises the shift from managing diversity and difference to the promotion of diversity and integration, and it requires public authorities to take a proactive initiating approach to contributing to a shared society rather than responding to the effects of a divided one. It is important here with this discussion. We need to promote positively our diversity in order to bring us together, to tackle the unconscious and conscious bias for whatever reasons. It is by no means surprising that there has been a backlash against the motion brought to corporate under the auspices of not wanting to highlight differences between people. This, however, is blatant homophobia in terms of opposing this motion and needs to be addressed. The DUP have a horrific track record of supporting rights of minority communities, especially the queer community. At a recent event in Stormont, Arlene Foster said that she wanted to recognise that some of our brightest and best in this country are part of the LGBT+ community. She said she wanted to send a clear message from this event that we are all someone's child and we are all valued part of this wonderful place we call home. She said that sexuality is for the individual, and she said it's certainly not a zero-sum game as it is sometimes presented. By issuing the party statement to the press last week against this motion, the DUP have removed any clear message and boiled this down yet again to a zero-sum game, playing politics with fundamental human rights. I would urge Councillor Smith to continue to stand up for all of his constituents and those in our borough and Northern Ireland, and explore options to advance and support LGBTQ rights within the rest of his party structures. At another event held in Stormont recently, the packed-out Queer Greens Alternative Queer Ulster event, an extremely powerful speech was delivered by Ryan McMillan, which spoke to a number of the many hundreds of people in attendance. Addressing the ex-First Minister, he said, "Stop using your faith against my community, for your faith is my faith and my community is your community. And continue to propagate and polarisation of Christianity and LGBTQ lives, you are not only damaging Christchurch, but you are causing unthinkable harm to his children and to the people you are elected to represent in government." And I would appeal all here to follow this advice. We need to show our queer community positive affirmation of identity and support for diversity. Last year were the 263 recorded attacks with a homophobic motivation, 33 transphobic. In our borough alone, 13 incidents and 7 homophobic crimes. While this is a reduction on the year before, more work needs to be done. Good relations throughout this borough traditionally focuses on issues of orange and green, of legacy issues, of cultural expressions, and there is a role here to engage and focus on the queer community. Lighting up structures is a great first step, but funding and supporting queer groups in every council across Northern Ireland and extending the operation of good relations to include sexual orientation and gender is another step. We can deal with this later. We can't change the legal premise of good relations, but we can operate its scheme. The Department for Education's recent research into post-primary school experiences showed that 2/3 of LGBTQ young people do not feel welcomed or valued in their post-primary school, and some young people decide not to come out because of the negative attitudes of others.
Councillor Woods, just a reminder, 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. A positive affirmation and action by the councils and others would go a long way to encourage dialogue and engagement between communities and individuals, but we need to do more. We need a long-term inclusive strategy in order to promote inclusivity and diversity in society, encouraging and entrenching tolerance and acceptance of everyone. We are all not all the same, nor should society be homogenous, or difference is what makes our society dynamic. A shared space is not a neutral space, and our shared space certainly needs some more diversity, and that's why I am calling on our council to follow the motion passed at corporate. Sexual and gender diversity should be celebrated, no matter who it is. Love is love, and isn't all that what matters?
Thank you, Councillor Woods. And I call on Councillor McDowell.
Mr Muir, I cannot support this wrecking amendment. Certainly it's hard to follow some of the emotional speeches made by some of my colleagues. I agree that this should not be a political issue, or certainly not a party political issue as well. I want to see equality and understanding and tolerance for everyone. My nephew and niece are gay, and I've seen the pressures that they faced growing up. And I would want to ensure that they would be made fully welcomed and valued in our society. The difficulties and pressures they face put tremendous pressures which can damage the emotion and their mental health. A small sign from this council, this is a small step by this council in lighting up the town hall with the rainbow colours, which will go a long way in showing how welcome that gay people are in the Ards and North Down area. It's a small step, but it would have a big positive impact, and actually would certainly help this council's image and standing. We seem to be going against the trend of other councils, and I think that is sending out, even that alone is sending out the wrong message.
I call Councillor Boyle.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually, when I read the corporate committee report and noticed that it actually went through by one vote, I thought that's fair enough. And when I looked at it closer, I noticed that Councillor Smith was responsible for that winning by one vote. Whilst I've never said him, I admire him for his courage. I admire him for doing the right thing. I admire him for supporting what is right. It may not always be easy to do the right thing, but at times there is the right thing to do. And Councillor Smith has done that, and I congratulate and commend him for that. I never thought we'd spend so long tonight on this, to be quite honest. I thought it would be a sort of maybe another simple vote, and this would go through, and that I could tell people out there who consistently ask me, how do I stick the doom and gloom council of Ards and North Down, and say, well, it's not really doom and gloom, it's maybe your perception, but maybe they've got it right on this occasion. It is maybe a bit doom and gloom. I mean, I got emails last week. Now, I have to be honest, some people use the old term that they've been bombarded with loads and hundreds of emails. I actually wasn't. I got 3 emails, actually. And I won't say who they're from, because this chamber may not be the right place to say that. But I got 3 emails anyway. And I have to say, I nearly had to ask myself, what year was this? And where was I living? And more importantly, is that the makeup of this borough? Councillor Connor talked about that pride doesn't speak to everyone. Well, neither does the DEP. I mean, the DEP don't speak for everyone either. This is a fairly wide borough, so it is. And I'm not so sure you've got the weight of the borough on your side with reference to this here. I think this was a simple, harmless motion to try and respect those who... And I've heard all the lauded comments about it, and I'm not so sure where they're all coming from all of a sudden, because for years I didn't hear that. I'm not so sure, particularly, I understand where Alderman Fletcher come, but particularly the Democratic Unionist Party, who really seem to speak with 4 tongues on this issue. They've nearly got a step forward today and 2 back tomorrow. They really need to sort their heads out, party out, broad-based thinking out as to where they actually stand on this, because there's nothing worse than sending out mixed messages in certain parts, in certain councils, where their members are, where their MLAs are, where their MPs operate. And yet this goes through. And all of a sudden we're back to the forces of darkness and the good old Ards and North Down and the merchant of doom and gloom. And here we have as if the heavens are going to fall in round us because we might light up the town hall. I mean, people really need to get themselves into the real world. And whilst I respect viewpoints, I always respect people's viewpoints, but really, guys, there comes a stage, you've got to start shifting a bit. I mean, you've got to do what the people want you to do in the borough. I had 3 emails appealing to me not to vote. You know what I mean? See, if it was 3,000 emails come down the line, I'd have to say, what's wrong here? 3 people didn't like it and have appealed to me not. I have to be honest, I didn't respond to them because I sort of got lost with chapter and verse halfway through them all. And I said to myself, this isn't for me. I know what way I'm voting. I'm sorry, Alderman Graham, I can't support your amendment because I don't think the amendment is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. I have no further indications, members. I'm cognizant of the fact that we've had a fairly comprehensive debate since the amendment was first tabled, so I'll maybe ask the Chief to rerun through the amendment as a recorded vote has been called. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Relating to the Corporate Committee item 15.3, the amendment is this Council acknowledges the many positive contributions from residents and workers of the Borough and visitors, regardless of those with a different religious belief, political opinion, racial groups, age, marital status, sexual orientation, women and men, disability and dependence, as in the Section 75 of the NI Act, and continues to run events open to all. Apologies. The Mayor against. The Deputy Mayor? 4. Alderman Carson? Against. Alderman Fletcher? 4. Alderman Gibson? 4. Alderman Gavin? Against. Alderman Graham? 4. Alderman Henry? Against. Alderman Irvine? 4. Alderman Carey? 4. Alderman McDowell? Against. Alderman Smith is absent. Councillor Adair? 4. Councillor Allen? 4. Councillor Armstrong Cotter? 4. Councillor Boyle? Against. Councillor Brooks? Against. Councillor Cathcart? 4. Councillor Chambers? Against. Councillor Cooper? 4. Councillor Cummings? 4. Councillor Douglas? Against. Councillor Dunlop? 4. Councillor Dunn? 4. Councillor Edmund? 4. Councillor Ferguson is absent. Councillor Gilmore? 4. Councillor Hunter? Against. Councillor Kennedy? 4. Councillor Martin? 4. Councillor McAlpine is absent. Councillor McElveen? 4. Councillor McLean? Absent. Councillor Mina? 4. Councillor Muir? Against. Councillor Robinson? Against. Councillor Smith? Against. Councillor Walker? Against. Councillor Wilson? Against. Councillor Woods? Against. Mr. Mayor, the result of the recorded poll is 24, 16 against, no abstentions and 4 were absent. So the amendment is carried.